So start recording. We are recording. So welcome everybody to Masters of Destiny, our Masterclass 6. Hello, Dougie. Lovely to see you. So welcome everybody to the final formal class. We do have another bonus session still coming up. So really great to have you all here. And as mentioned, what fantastic synchronicity that with the change of dates and the rollout of the program, we ended up doing this on a gap day and on the first of a new day of the ninth wave. I mean, I couldn't have been planned any better, and I certainly didn't look at that when I was putting the dates together. So again, just amazing synchronicities in respect of our gatherings and the opportunities that we've been presented with, flowing with the divine plan, for want of a better description. So thank you everybody for accommodating and being flexible enough to go along with the changes, because it's all working out perfectly. So before I put the presentation up, I know that Bonnie wanted to share something in respect of the last session, and we'll just open it up for anybody else who'd like to make any comments before we go into session 6, working with the ninth wave. So yeah, Bonnie, if you'd like to share.
Well, I have found it, as I think Rachel had said, I had missed the last one and just listened to it. I just found the waves being so helpful to understand what's gone on globally and what happens, and just seeing the positives and the upside and the downside. I don't even want to say positive and negatives. But after listening to the last class, and probably because, as you said, we've lived a lot of it, it was wonderful. I loved hearing all the connections that you made with what's gone on in our world, you know, starting back in the 80s. So I was listening to you, and I was really identifying with where I was in my life and how I followed this path and was able to keep my balance in some places and not in others. And as you were talking about flow, all of a sudden I realized, oh my word, I could really track my own journey and evolution through those stages. And again, where I kept balance, where I didn't. And one of the years that you mentioned, I had a car accident, and it was soft tissue. I had jerked the car, so it really, you know, hurt the muscles more than the spine. And a friend of mine had a health food store and said, why don't you come do some yoga? And I was like, yoga. Now remember, this is a long time ago. So yoga, you were like way out there if you were doing yoga. I wouldn't even tell my clients I was doing yoga, but it was Kundalini yoga. And so I can tell you, I still do Kundalini yoga, because I know Julie made a comment about yoga. There are 50 different kinds, if not more, of yoga. But I realized in doing that yoga that its whole premise is about going inward and honoring the divine within. And I can't talk to any other yoga. Even today's class was about balancing our energies and being compassionate toward ourselves and, you know, our personal power. And we do poses, not standing on your head and those kinds of things. And it's very honoring to your body. But I just realized, as Julie, you talked about, I could see where my whole path of yoga was actually my first going inward. I learned Sanskrit and all kinds of things. But as you talked about the different ways we put, you know, other people as our gurus, I can see the gurus that I followed. But, you know, each step led to the next step for my growth. And so my awareness grew to bringing me to this present moment, still looking at, you know, what is truth for me? Where is my truth? And just, sorry, but I do love my Kundalini yoga because it brings me back home to myself. It's all about that, to go inward. So I so appreciated that journey, Julie, because as I say, it made me look at my own journey based on the eighth wave. And I was actually sort of surprised how well I followed it.
So. Bonnie, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's really important to recognize, because that is an aspect of the original teachings of yoga. And that's part and parcel of the eighth wave and this movement from the east to the west. you know, sort of those Asian practices and understandings that were brought to the West. And I think it's absolutely been part of the journey that we've undertaken. It is interesting because I remember my first introduction to yoga, which was also in the 80s, was to Hatha yoga. And I remember being told that Hatha yoga is only physical yoga. It doesn't include the spiritual component, you know, and there it was, it was all about for a lot of the time, the poses and the, what's the word? That striving, the goal orientation that I spoke about. So I think that's where some of the differences came in. But the true value and the true understanding of yoga as a spiritual balancing practice is absolutely vital. And that's where our discernment comes in respect of what we do, how we approach it, and what we get from it. And absolutely, you know, it's been a part of my journey too. So really, really appreciate your comments on that, and also how much value that added to your journey by taking you within.
Well, it did. And now they're in gyms and every place.
Yes.
And I moved over here and tried to find a Kundalini teacher. It was in a gym. To me, it's sacred. They create a sacred space. It's about the divinity within. And in the gym, I was so desperate, but it was horrible. Yes. But no, it's not about, I mean, Kundalini is about all your bodies and energy systems. But I think you're right about Hatha. As I say, I can only speak to Kundalini.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same thing with some of the healing techniques and processes, is that the sacredness has been taken out of them by the commoditization of them. So the eighth wave introduced us to all of those, which is wonderful. And let's face it, we can't get, and we couldn't get to this place where we acknowledge and recognize the ninth wave without having gone through all of that, you know. So I think it's a real honor to have got to the awakening point that we're at the moment, and recognizing that it could not have been any other way. Ultimately, it's about recognizing the perfect nature of our entire life's journey, that it could not have been any other way. It had to be the way that it's been to bring us to this present moment in time. And that includes all of the eighth wave stuff, being able to look at it and see, and acknowledge. Absolutely. And value.
Thank you. Because it really highlighted, because I so easily say, well, you know, how did I get here? Why did I make this mistake or follow this person? But that it just was a beautiful synopsis. And it wasn't, when I was listening, it didn't happen when I was listening. I was pondering it later, and all of a sudden all the pieces came together. So thank you.
No, that's wonderful. And I think that's what's happening as a part and parcel of the knowledge sharing, of the information sharing, is that ultimately those understandings do begin to filter down. So being able to connect the dots and see the patterning in our own life is such a vital component and aspect of the journey and of the elevation into the ninth wave. So I do see, while this program has been very knowledge-based, that it's been a vital aspect to establish that foundation. Yeah, so we can work experientially from there. But those awarenesses, I mean, I've had loads of aha moments as I've been putting the material together. So yeah, thank you for that, Bonnie. Is there anything that anybody else would like to contribute or comment on before we go into today's class? Nope. Okay, everyone's muted. Okay, well, that's great. We've got the chat room up. So I am going to launch the, let's find it, the screen share. There we go, share. Okay, there we are. So welcome everybody to masterclass number 6 of the Masters of Destiny program, the ninth wave and coming home. And this really does, it represents the pinnacle. The ninth wave is the completion wave, which essentially serves and facilitates us coming home to ourselves, as opposed to the oft quoted phrase, and I've been there, I've used it very often, which is take me out of here, take me home, going home, rather than coming home. So the ninth wave represents an understanding and a context and a framework within which we begin to embody the totality of who we are. So I hope you're going to enjoy this masterclass. Everybody, it's just a delight to see you here. Without further ado, let's have a look at what we're going to have a look at during this particular program. So we've got keys to aligning with the ninth wave and internal self-mastery. It's not going to all be in this order, so these were just the bullet points. Bringing it all together with a new coherence and being able to see the perfection in the totality of our journey. Wholeness versus healing, so we'll have a brief look at that. Accessing new realities and birthing the new earth. This is a time of no filters and recognizes the perfection in the entire journey of humanity. So this is an evolutionary journey that is part and parcel of a divine plan. And it's that aspect of the divine plan that is seeking acknowledgement through this phase and alignment and the resonance with the ninth wave. Redefining your life purpose and your destiny, embracing polarity, critical thinking, blending and merging the mind and heart. We've spoken about this often in other programs. This is really what the ninth wave brings us the opportunity to do. Grooming and being the leaders of the future. Understanding the links between the ninth wave cosmic events and the Schumann resonances. I've just really thrown that one in. I'm not going to spend an inordinate amount of time with it, but I just really wanted to highlight that for the purpose again of understanding. Links between Africa, the Maya, the ninth wave, and the re-emerging diamond light consciousness, and why that's suddenly on everybody's lips. Why the sacred white animals are becoming more evident and how to work with them, because they are an aspect of the ninth wave consciousness and of the diamond light. So we're just going to briefly have a look at that within this context. So for the purposes of review, we will just have a quick look at this chart again. The ninth wave represents completion of the Mayan calendrical system. That does not mean that everything is completed the way that it is, because the potentialities of the ninth wave are huge, they are enormous, there is a complexity that we are working with, and they will unfold, the potentialities will unfold in accordance with our participation and resonance with this particular wave. It is the wave of unification that supports us in unifying all of the disparate aspects of all of the previous waves. So it's no mean feat to do that, bearing in mind everything that we have understood about the way that the previous waves have manifested on the planet, because we're undoing all of those manifestations in order to infuse the potentialities of the ninth wave into the highest expression of all of the previous waves. So it's really quite a massive undertaking, and this is going to continue and continue. So yeah, it's not like the fluffy love and light type concept or instantaneous flash and everything is sorted and everything is unified. It's our participation that is creating the outcomes and our involvement with these holograms. So it represents the download from universal mind, from the cosmic tree, from the universe, of the unification principles, service to others, reharmonization, and that was activated for us. In other words, we gained access to this wave on March the 9th, 2011. So there's some interesting information that correlates with that particular time frame as well. So the unification wave active in 2011. So it's a relatively recent manifestation, if you like, upon the planet. Or we have it's relatively recently that we've had access to it. yeah, I'll talk more about it when we get through. Relationships to life, which are created by different polarities. So you can actually see, and we have mentioned this, that the ninth wave provides us with what Carl Kalleman refers to as a self-transforming approach to life. So that is in recognizing our ability to connect with the divine nature of the ninth wave. We actually are able to access that power in order to transform our life, and as a consequence, transform all of the lives, if you like, within the collective and around us. So it's this, it's not waiting for somebody else to transform me. It is this an internal transformation process as a consequence of our connection with the divine. So it's very internally based. And because it has no filters, it represents, you can see this, so the light shines on both aspects of the brain. Because it has no filters, it represents an openness to all aspects of life and unfiltered access to the divine. So, and there we have that one. So let's have a look at the ninth wave. Sorry, I just need to shuffle these things around on my screen here. So the ninth wave initiated in March 2011 with a pre-wave in July 2010. Now, I don't know about you guys, this was also really interesting for me because 2010 was also quite a pivotal year. So it was like catching the pre-wave. There was a heck of a lot that was brought to light. So as this hologram was downloaded, which represents sort of unfiltered light, it brought a lot of shadow stuff up to the surface. And just by way of providing a framework to that, you might want to go back and have a look at your own lives. In 2010, I was actually sharing a house in Wiltshire with a friend of mine, and we had all sorts of really, really wacky things going on during that year, including interferences by the perceived dark side. There was a lot of ego stuff. There was a lot of being dragged down into the mire as that wave, this pre-wave was actually made evident. We had sightings of orbs in the sky. We were in crop circle country. We had black helicopters flying over the place because we'd actually gridded our home with a diamond grid. There was all sorts of really, really weird stuff going on that year. So it's kind of like the light was being shone on the underworld, on the underbelly of a lot of the shadow stuff during that time. It started in 2010. So it has a frequency, oh, there's a typo, really sorry, I've got 26 days. It should be 36 days, 18 day and 18 night. So it has a very, very high and fast frequency. Now, bear in mind, when we're talking about frequency here, we're talking about subtle energy frequencies that are not measurable with standard equipment. So you can't equate this to Hertzian frequencies in our traditional concept of measuring energetic fields or frequency. So we're talking subtle energy frequency, but the fact that it has a turnaround of 36 days, it's like every month we're experiencing an 18-day window of daytime and an opportunity to create and move things forward. And we have an 18-day nighttime during which it's almost as if the ninth wave is switched off. It's an opportunity to rest, and it's an opportunity to go into all of the previous waves and to initiate and implement the healing of the previous waves before we come out of it again into another 18-day cycle. So ninth wave is unfiltered and open to the light. It completes the destiny chart for humanity as a whole. So we are currently riding this destiny wave. However, this is going to continue unfolding for hundreds of years. It is about coming home, as I've just said, versus going home. So that is the ninth wave versus the eighth wave understanding. Eighth wave, as we'd said, tends to be it's right brain out there, very cosmic. My home is out there, it's on Sirius or the Pleiades, or it's in the cosmos, and I feel more at home there, take me home. Ninth wave is about the embodiment of all of that energy that brings us back into being. It brings us home to ourselves. And this is where some of the parallels start coming in with the understanding of diamond consciousness. For those of you who've been with this community for an extended period of time, you'll know that I've actually used that phrase as well on numerous occasions, that we come home to ourselves. This is about bridging the worlds and embodying. So ninth wave is also about quantum understandings and interconnectedness. So it is about science catching up with spiritual understandings as more and more of the quantum realm and the peculiarities and the amazing nature of the quantum fields begins to be understood. So this is opening up. Thanks, Rachel, for that comment. She says, I'm definitely feeling more aligned within myself. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of us that are beginning to resonate and connect with this ninth wave frequency and the diamond consciousness are anchoring more and more of that higher self in, and feeling the courage and the strength that comes from that, and feeling more of ourselves, sort of really literally coming home. So yeah, it's quantum. We are entering the quantum realm and the quantum fields, where rapid change is indeed possible, even if it is not immediately visible in the external environment, and that is as a consequence of the interference patterns with the other waves. Its initiation in March 2011 is really interesting because there's been correlations through the previous waves, and Carl Kalleman talks about this, marked by geological as well as political unrest. And just by way of that, we had in March 2011, we had the Fukushima earthquake, which spilled radiation and into the physical environment, into the atmosphere. So we had a huge ecological event as a consequence of that. So what that served to do is to open people's eyes to the consequences of our previous actions that were taking place through the prior waves. So, so there's the Fukushima event. There was also the Arab Spring. It was marked by a lot of political unrest and protests. The Occupy movement, wars in Syria and Libya, which was all about beginning to address social injustices, which is a key attribute of the ninth wave, is looking at those social injustices and people beginning to take action in order to correct them. Bonnie's just put a comment here which says, thank you for mentioning our new book, Be Your Most Powerful Self, which are simple strategies to come home to yourself quickly when we lose ourselves, or to do the deep work we're doing here. Oh, Bonnie, that's fantastic. Yes, very, very well worthwhile resource as a follow-on from your initial book with mindfulness strategies. So I do think that's really important to perhaps have handy, because they're quick, actionable strategies to enable you to come home to yourself very, very easily. So thank you for bringing that up. I know I'd mentioned it in the previous session. So the ninth wave is about unity consciousness and equality and reharmonization. And it's equality in recognizing the individual sovereignty of each and every human being and the value of each and every human life. And in fact, not just human life, but all life, and reharmonizing that life. So that's no easy task when you look around at the world today, but those are the holograms that are delivered by the ninth wave. So you can also, I think, begin to see where many of the qualities of the ninth wave were also attributes of the unfiltered fifth wave, in recognizing the equality, this unfiltered access to the divine, this unity consciousness. So there is a parallel between the two waves. However, the complexity of the ninth wave, because of the frequencies as well as the interference patterning of the prior waves, really identifies the ninth wave as a unique occurrence. So it's not that it's just a repeat of the fifth wave and restoration of the fifth wave way of being. It is an upgrading of the fifth wave into a ninth wave modern context. With all of the technologies that we actually have and all of the developments that we have at our disposal. So I really just wanted to mention that. I've been saying all along, we're really bridging the fifth wave and the ninth wave. It is a wave that downloads holograms for universal mind, which provides us with unimagined possibilities and potentialities. And saying that is that it is so complex and so huge that we don't even know how it's going to unfold at the moment. It is unpredictable. So it can unfold in so many ways, especially in combination with the eighth wave, which is limitless and so open. So we are moving into a time where there are potentials that we could perhaps we cannot foresee at this moment in time. It is about transcending, and I put in inverted commas or in brackets here, or integrating ego. So we recognize that ego developed as a consequence of separation from source and from our divine self. So in this return to the embodiment and the totality of the embodiment of our true self, our divine self, there is a huge amount of integrating the shadow aspects of ego so that our personality becomes addressed in service to our true self and the core of who we are. So we come home to that. So we transcend, or we integrate the ego so that that becomes our servant rather than our ruler. Our sovereign self, our true self, is the guide and the ruler of the upcoming processes. And it is about diamond consciousness. So this is why since 2011, in fact, probably more so just in the recent 5 years, there have been more and more people beginning to connect with, even though the understanding is perhaps not as deep yet, because just of the lack of critical thinking. But there's a lot of connecting with now this concept of diamond light codes and diamond light consciousness through what we may term the spiritual community. So even though a lot of it is done with a new age kind of flavor, it has and continues to pave the ground and pave the way for deeper understandings of those that are beginning to align with the ninth wave and to carry it forward. So everything actually has its purpose, and there is a perfect unfolding. So Rachel said here, a lovely comment, it's as though you could describe those who look to control us are the ego aspects of ourselves. Good comment, Rachel, because they are the external manifestation of the shadow ego aspects that we have not integrated within ourselves, where we have not integrated our power, our understanding of power. That's something that I'll note during this particular class, where we've not integrated our power, where we are fearful of it as a consequence of everything that's gone in previous waves. Yes, absolutely. So that also helps us to perhaps change the lens that we use to view the external world, because as a collective, that's what it is. Yeah, they're the externalized shadow aspects of unintegrated, unacknowledged personality or ego. So I've got gifts and there are challenges to the ninth wave. So lest we view, we might view the ninth wave as idealistic in some sense because it represents unification. And it sounds idealistic because it does provide us with the holograms for the creation of a golden age upon the planet. And yet it is not ideal or idealistic from the perspective of what it's going to take to achieve that. So I think that's what's really important. So let's have a look at the gifts and the challenges of the ninth wave. Gifts of the ninth wave: new levels of equality and personal sovereignty. I'll just read this comment out. It's in the chat room also. The anger we feel towards those externally is the remembrance of giving our power away. It's our anger. That's exactly it. It's the fear and the anger within ourselves. When we return to wholeness, we are able to see that they are us. Yes, and the interconnectedness and that true recognition of the totality of interconnectedness enables us to see that. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so gifts of the ninth wave are extended and expanded healing, personal, collective, and planetary. Unification. So we're not denouncing healing. We are, through the ninth wave lenses, we are shifting our focus, if you like, on healing as part of a journey towards wholeness. So this differs from the eighth wave concept of healing, where it is, I am the healer and I have something that I can do for you as an interventionist method. This is actually viewing healing as a path to inner wholeness. So it offers us more opportunities through the holograms of unification, because healing is really about ultimately our wholeness, and that wholeness is self-unification within. So there's a slight shift in the focus and understanding of that healing. Gifts also present as harmony in relationships, as well as reharmonizing the distribution of wealth. So we were talking about the review of economic and financial systems as the sixth and seventh wave systems begin to break down. Oh, and by the way, the convergence of the waves into a new day, it's only the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th that converge as a new day in 2031. The 6th wave is still in a night for another almost 400 years. So that means we will continue to see the breakdown of those paradigms and those belief systems that have been part of the sixth wave over that period of time. However, as momentum builds within the eighth and the ninth waves, there will be new paradigms overlaying that, which will help to mitigate the shock and the trauma of the breakdown of the sixth wave. So 2031, from 2031 onwards, when 7, 8, and 9 are elevated all into a daytime at the same time, that's when we see tremendous opportunities for moves forward. So I just wanted to make that mention. Okay, so ninth wave is also about a personal relationship with the divine. It's not needing to go through any mediator, whether that be from the old waves and priests and the church, or even the eighth wave, which is going through channels, angels, and channeled beings. So it becomes now a personal, integrated, internal relationship with the divine. So we let go of the need for all of those external interventions or mediators. It's about not having any limits. The filters are off. So there is a huge amount of potential that can unfold. And because we do not have the mind that can even conceive of the totality of the mind of the divine, that's why there is still an incredible amount of mystery and an incredible amount of possibility that can open up to us. So it's revealing and correcting injustice and oppression. This is part of the movement forward. Ongoing activation of new potentialities and conscious choice. declining power of the West and breaking down control structures. And this is where we may also see in the external environment more and more protesters and what we may deem anarchy in respect of those who are beginning to oppose those control structures and demand new implementations on the basis of a new way of thinking. Reduction in competition in line with unity thinking. Creation and implementation of beneficial technologies. So we see a lot of technology at the moment developing on the top of original inventions. A lot of technology, but being adversely used for control purposes. So this is really looking at utilizing the technology that is being developed as well as new ones coming online for the benefit of humanity and not to control humanity. So as the control grids break down, it's going to become more and more prevalent and evident. It is the era, or will be known as, with the ninth wave, the era of fulfillment. It is a transition to a unification of the mind and the heart, transcendence of the ego self, and embodiment of, we've got something in the chat room here, divine self. So Bunny said, healing was the whole mental health energy. People came to be fixed, yes, which was why it was difficult to me in the move over to coaching energy work. Natural health was refreshing to show the client has the power within. Absolutely, Bunny, thank you. Self-suffering has been a focus for several years. It can be a challenge without places like this to understand and move what keeps us from being home for ourselves. Self-sovereign and remembering wholeness. Beautiful. Thank you, Bunny. Yes. So you can, I think what's beautiful is that you guys can see you have been such an important part of the transition, that you've been aligning with this ninth wave without perhaps recognizing that as being the influence, but you've been naturally making this transition for yourselves and connecting the dots and moving out of what no longer felt in alignment or comfortable for a period of years. So it's just really lovely. Thank you for that. So one of the other gifts of the ninth wave is greater interspecies connectivity, communication, and cooperation. And when I talk interspecies, I'm not only talking about communicating with different species on the planet, because it is about opening up animal communication, and there is a lot more of that happening now. Telepathic communication with multiple different species on the planet, also interspecies from the perspective of cosmic races. So we've seen a lot of that beginning to open up with a lot of the truth movement. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and then also needs to be a lot of discernment, because just because a life form happens to be cosmic in nature does not automatically make it higher in consciousness or understanding than where we're at, you know, because there are lots of different levels of consciousness out there in the cosmos, lots of different species that actually have developed in line with this overall progression of the 9 waves of evolution. So there's no guarantee that those cosmic races will be at a higher stage of evolution, if you like. So there's a great deal of discernment that's needed. However, there is absolutely, hence this absolute, you know, openness in channeling, for instance, has been fueled by, it's been fueled by the 9th wave and this connectivity. So Rachel says, Diamond Light Reiki is so in line with the 9th wave. Yes, it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it also recognizes, and I'm glad you said that, Rachel, it also recognizes the rightness of the process, even while we're setting about correcting the misunderstandings. It's like we would not be able to do that without the process having taken place as it has. So it's, yeah, the perfection in everything. Thank you for mentioning that. So it's about cooperation and service to the whole. It's a self-transforming approach to life, which we've mentioned, and it's manifesting personal destiny as an aspect of divine plan. So it takes our focus away from me and the self-authoring of our life and the creating our personal mission, to understanding and connecting with our piece of the jigsaw in accordance with the overall divine patterning and divine plan. So we kind of, to me, it's like we kind of relax a little bit, and approach that whole context of, with the eighth wave, it's like, I need to find out what my mission is, my mission, kind of thing. And it's more about simply surrendering to, the more we align, that's it, Rachel, we are the mission. And the more we align with the divine plan and simply accept ourselves completely and totally and surrender and drop all of the barriers that prevent us from being that, the more we take the next step and each right step along the way. We don't need to know necessarily what our mission is if we're in touch with our heart, if we're in touch with that aspect of ourselves that is connected with the divine. We literally do. Our life becomes the mission as it unfolds. So it's about our intention to support the ultimate divine plan, our recognition of that. So let's have a look. I love this. Sorry, I just had to bring this in because I picked it up from Tammy Simon, It Sounds True, with a note that she sent through recently. And it also maybe highlights a bit of the distinction between the eighth wave and the ninth wave. She says, I had an allergy to the word manifestation. I associated it with people using spiritual principles to satisfy egoic drives. And the reason why I say that's eighth wave is because in the eighth wave, the left brain is actually in darkness. So the ego is in the shadow self, and it is still very often running the show without our realization. And that's where things like the law of attraction were promulgated on the basis of egoic drives. So that's where she's coming from with this. Conscious manifestation is wholly different. The focus is not on getting what you want and feel that you lack, but instead it's on creating from a sense of sufficiency and learning how to become an instrument of the unlimited creative power of the universe. And that is the definition that I have a huge resonance with when it comes to understanding manifestation, and the consciousness of it. And there is a big difference. That the movie The Secret, while it was necessary to actually expose, again, everything is actually perfect, to expose the fact that there are influences and powers bigger than our little self in the world. It's not that we control those powers in order to manifest what we want, which is kind of the context within which that is presented. So it's not about what we want. It is about how we can be of service. So it's what our soul, our divine aspect of self desires for us. And that is what we bring into manifestation through alignment. So that's conscious manifestation is ninth wave principles. So challenges of the ninth wave. Lots of unrealistic expectations. And the way that some of those things are actually being presented. People are connecting with this concept of the light being switched on, because the light is switched on in respect of universal mind, creative mind on both sides of the brain. So it's unfiltered. So we live in that space of light. So what people have woven around this, and the way that it's actually come through, is this expectation of a big event, a single event, which is, they've called it, in fact, it's like out there on the ethers, the event. And it's like a blinding flash of light, and everything changes. It's like fuels our ascension, which is equivalent to the biblical rapture. A mystical boom you know, that happens. So maybe the sun releases some massive coronal ejection, and boom, everybody's transformed. Also, this concept of the golden age as relatable to a one season world of bliss. Follow your bliss and everything will be all right. The golden age is just everybody's going to live in total bliss, and it's just going to be wonderful. And so it totally disregards and misses out the gap between where we're at now and what it's actually going to take to achieve that, and what we need to do to achieve that, because it's our actions that will bring about the manifestation of universal mind through our beingness. And if we think about this, you know, this wanting to live in a one season world where nothing changes, that's coming out of the world of ego and the anxiety of, from Geraldine's talk, the foundation for archetypes, or the survival archetypes, because they don't like change. So people want this one season world where nothing changes, where everything is harmonious and it's just absolutely wonderful. We don't live in a one season world, and nothing's going to change that. We live in a world where, you know, sort of seasons change, and there are times to go within and experience hibernation. There are challenges which actually fuel our adaptation and flexibility and ability to grow. So there's a lot of unrealistic expectations out there about how, why, and when. So Michelle said, yeah, an insight years ago was that the healer could not exist without the healee, the person being healed. Each is dependent upon the other. Remove the need for healing and both would disappear. Well, both would be whole. They would be whole within themselves and interconnected without that need. Absolutely. Okay, so challenges as well. The challenge at the moment is that there's a very small percentage of the population resonating with the ninth wave, and we've got an approximation here of around 1%. This, however, is starting to increase in intensity, so it requires a lot more strength and respect of that resonance in order to translate those holograms into physical reality. So we need a lot more people moving from the 8th wave into the 9th wave. And Rachel said a few times, which I think is absolutely wonderful, that the next awakening is going to be reawakening those who already think they're awake. So it's a lot of those who are within the 8th wave paradigms who have woken up, you know, to something that's way bigger than themselves, reawakening as the light comes on in the left brain. So as the filters actually fall away. So it's a massive reawakening, which is part and parcel of the next couple of years. So we need a lot more people at that level in order to mitigate some of the chaos that is arising as a consequence of the current disturbances to the earlier waves. Okay, so another challenge, it requires internal integration of all prior waves and the shadow aspects or archetypes. So there's a lot that we still need to do internally in order to facilitate that the totality of that integration, the awareness of all of the impacts and implications. So it goes beyond our own personal life into the collective. So we're doing a lot of that integration at the moment. Rachel's just said, I think that's why we're also seeing a separation within the conscious communities. Yeah, that's exactly it. Because there are those that are seeing at the 9th wave level, and the 8th wavers who are still experiencing a left brain that's in darkness are struggling to be able to comprehend that 9th wave thinking. So there is, in essence, a separation in the communities, which is quite fascinating. Laurie said the reawakening within the 8th wave to the 9th wave reminds me of the evolution of the spiral dynamics wave. Do you know, it's so interesting you said that, Laurie, because I almost put a spiral dynamics file in, image in today, because I was going, I know that there are parallels here, and I think that can be explored a little bit more deeply, but I thought there was probably enough here to work with. Okay, so it also involves dealing with the discomfort of reawakening and seeing fully all of the polarities and the accompanying emotional states of grief, loss, disbelief, letting go of earlier wave ideas and ideals. And I think that is where, at the eighth wave level, if you like, transitioning into the ninth is really difficult because there's a lot of holding on to beliefs and ideals as a consequence of that initial awakening. So to get people to drop those and recognize that perhaps, they've been hooked into something that is maybe not the total picture is a challenge. So it is uncomfortable to reawake at a whole new level. So we need to be aware of that. Moving from passivity to a large degree, the eighth wave is almost about is about the passivity. So it's just imagine it and it can happen, sort of create it in your imagination, to a balance of receptivity and heart-based action. And that is the key. It's got to be heart-based action. So it's really transitioning and moving from and out of that, the passivity concept into action mode in a different way. There was something else I wanted to mention to you guys about that, and I just can't remember what it was at the moment. If I remember, I'll bring it up in a minute. It's about acceptance and allowance, which is not the same as denial to a large extent. The eighth wave, I don't do dark. Denial of what's in the dark, denial of what's in the shadow, is a part of that. But acceptance and allowance does not mean not acting upon something that is a demonstration of injustice. So that's where heart-based action is totally needed. And a requisite. I hope that makes sense, because we get the denial. It's kind of like you create your own reality stuff. Well, you've created that. You're lying down. I always remember Nassim Haramein using this as an example in one of his talks. And he said, one of the worst places in the world to actually have an accident is in Sedona, because if you're lying there in the middle of the street, you'll get somebody bending over you saying, now, what on earth did you do to create that? Whereas instead what is needed is somebody to spring into action and go, gosh, are you hurt? How can I actually support? How can I help you? Never mind, you just created it. So this is accepting that everything happens for a purpose, while also being able to act with compassion depending on what the situation actually requires, and having the ability to discern what's required in that moment and not just use conciliatory language or words, if that makes sense. So it's about grounding and embodying the ninth wave holograms, and that's a challenge. Consciously manifesting without the sense of entitlement, which, looking back at the eighth wave, we see that is one of the programs that has been running through, especially the children that were born into the eighth wave. And it is a sense that they're coming through where there's this sense of I'm entitled to everything because of my birthright, because I've been born. Whereas it is about us becoming a clear vessel and a clear conduit for the divine plan. So it's not about necessarily being entitled to anything. It's about balancing intuitive trust and questioning. So this has been mentioned before in previous ways, because it provides us with a challenge in the eighth wave as well. So it's about right, left brain balance, discernment, discrimination, and having the ability to question things and not just accept things. So you accept and you actually are able to question. Allowing the feminine energy and the heart to lead, and that's a huge challenge in society at the moment that still does not truly recognize the ultimate gifts and benefits of the feminine qualities, still viewed as very emotional. Challenging is also self-transformation, so it's not looking anymore for gurus or somebody who can do it for us. Looking for the easy way, that is something also that is perhaps a pattern of the eighth wave. There is this concept out there that everything should be easy. If it's not easy and it's not fun, then don't do it. Whereas sometimes what is asked of us actually demands and asks a lot of courage of us to step up to the mark in order to be of service in whichever way our little piece of the jigsaw puzzle is intended to fit into the global and collective environment in whatever way that we are deemed to benefit humanity. And that's not always easy to do. It might be simple in concept, but it's not easy. So there's overcoming that paradigm that we need to only take the easy way. Going with the flow is a natural imperative. Going with the flow sometimes means getting over some hurdles. It's about stepping out of the box, putting our head above the parapet, especially in the so-called spiritual community at the moment where you're going to get shouted down. So yes, and I've done that a couple of times and not been invited back to a couple of telesummits and talk shows. But it really is about stepping out of the box, you know, and putting our head above the parapet and taking the risks. Wholeness versus healing, which we've mentioned already, and becoming familiar with the concepts of surrender and true power, because it's only in the surrendering of all of our ego-imposed boundaries as a consequence of the previous waves that we enable ourselves and we start becoming familiar with our true power and acting from that place. So from this, you will actually see that even the ninth wave, you know, being what it is, brings with it a lot of challenges in respect of our continued alignment. Does anybody have any questions there at the moment? Does that make sense for you? I'm just going to have a little drink of water while... Okay, you're all very quiet. So we'll move on. I guess that makes sense. Bonnie says, surrender and true power have been the lessons and the challenges lately. Yeah. And surrender remains a key word and a key concept associated with the ninth wave. And that is always going to be so, because the only way that we can access the totality of our true power is through that letting go of everything that is standing in the way, all of the patterning. It's been the theme of my life, certainly for the last, since starting to work with the diamond consciousness. That's where the journey has taken me, into deeper and deeper letting go. So Rachel says, it's been interesting letting go of the patterns and becoming true to ourselves. Yes, it is. It's a fascinating journey. Laurie says, many of these would be super interesting and helpful to go more deeply into. Love it. Fantastic. Thank you, Laurie. So that gives us a guideline for the experiential aspect as we move further with this. So Bonnie says, yes, real magic does happen with surrender. Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. And I could tell you lots of stories. Those of you who I've spent time with personally would have heard some of the stories. Just absolutely. It's time to expand even more, says Rachel. Yes. Now, I love this because we need to bear in mind that in the concept of no time, from a universal perspective, all 9 waves have already existed. They have always been there, which is why the indigenous peoples of the 5th wave, the earlier peoples with their unfiltered access, could literally see into, and they could see the potentials of the 9th wave, which is where a lot of the prophecies came from. And it is our development which has been necessary in order to bring us to the point of accessibility, so that we could access the 9th wave, ancestors from the future. Yes, indeed. So I just loved these quotes because I thought they were so relevant to where we are at the moment. And I love this one. It says, everything that needs to be said has already been said. But since no one was listening, everything must be said again. I just thought, yeah, it's sort of because you're now speaking to different ears, you know, and to different people. And this also corresponds with Victor Vernon Wolf's work with the bioholograms, is that the problems only exist because the solution is there. So when we shift that paradigm and understand that the problems down here are created because of the solution and the end result, it means we can go there, as in the ninth wave. The end result is in the ninth wave. So we can actually go there in order to access and harness the what we need in order to bring about the change. So yes, paradox and confusion are the guardians of the truth, by Peter Ralston. I thought that was also excellent. You guys would know also that my particular passion is also with the paradoxes, is sort of holding the paradox and those polarities is where we actually find the truth, and that's no easy thing. It's those apparent contradictions. It's okay to not have the answer yet. Continue your journey and trust the process, because we don't have the answer yet. The ninth wave gives us the guidelines, and we don't have all of the answers yet. They're unfolding bit by bit. Wisdom is knowing I am no thing. Love is knowing I am everything. And between the two, my life flows. So between no thing and everything. And that's also really interesting, because the no thing is actually there in the mystery of the divine. So the closer we actually align ourselves with the universal flow and that divine plan, the more we're able to access and recognize that we are that and we are everything. So again, it's another one of those beautiful, beautiful paradoxes, you know, sort of the old infinity wave between the two, and operating between wisdom and love and holding them both. And that requires understanding. Hence, a lot of the knowledge sharing with this that we're going to then translate into experience further down the track. So I hope you enjoy those. To me, they were just embodiments of the ninth wave concept and principles. And here's another one from the Buddha. I loved it. It says, it's your mind that creates the world. It is the world that creates your mind. So there you have it. Again, it's the ninth wave and the downloads from the ninth wave, the universal mind, that actually creates or holds the blueprints. And yet it is so we download those. So it's our mind and universal mind that creates the world. And yet it is what we see out there in the world that has shaped our mind in terms of how we respond, act, believe, and think in order to translate what we've downloaded into creation. Does that make sense? So it really is, you know, it is one of those ultimate paradoxes. So our mind creates the world and the world creates our mind. And there we move between the two and we live between the two. So it's the eternal yin yang. So yeah, there we have it. Ninth wave. Rachel says I'm pinching that first one. Yeah, everything that has been said has already been said, but no one was listening. So we need to say it again. And that also, I laughed when I saw that, because I thought, you know, I was talking about some of this stuff 15 years ago and no one was listening. And now I'm saying it all again. And it's wonderful because now there are ears to hear it. So yes, it is actually just part and parcel of the journey. So let's have a look at this wholeness versus healing. And I just pulled out a couple of definitions here. So healing is viewed as curing. So curing something, curative, restorative, restoring something to its original state, or soothing. It is the act or process of making or becoming whole, sound, or well. So it is an intervention that is required in the process of becoming whole. So it is actually part of the journey. Wholeness, on the other hand, is the quality or the state of being whole, entire or sound, entireness, totality, completeness. It's the quality of something considered as a whole. Therefore, it is an internal state of being. So healing is absolutely necessary with the goal of becoming whole. So we move from that intervention and accept sometimes the guidance that is given, which helps us to internally restore wholeness within. And the greater the degree of wholeness, the more our alignment with the ninth wave. So we move ultimately from healing and external intervention into wholeness and being able to facilitate our own wholeness once we have the understanding. So I hope that makes sense, because wholeness is the ninth wave concept, whereas healing is transitioning. We could say that healing is transitioning from the eighth to the ninth. So Rachel says, definition, wholeness to me is remembering all aspects of our true self and being true to self. Absolutely. So there's many ways of viewing that, and that is still remembering all aspects of self is an internal process. So yes, we become familiar with ourself and our true self in its entirety, in its totality, as a facet of the divine expression, the overall divine expression. So this is where the ninth wave is taking us. Yeah, we're not broken. That's lovely. Thank you. Comment I heard for many years that we were never broken and never needed healing. We were always returning to wholeness. Absolutely. And I think it's that understanding that needs to be taken into. That's the, I think, part of the fragmentation and the duality that still exists in the eighth wave, that you have this light on the right side of the brain and the darkness on the left. So you still have this fragmentation of self, this inherent duality as a consequence of that hologram. And it leads to perhaps the feeling or understanding that we are broken and that we need something fixed. So ninth wave understanding is that return to wholeness. With that understanding. Now, one of the things here that I just wanted to mention to you is about the ninth wave and cosmic events, because this is also really interesting. That is our sun. You know, there's a big debate raging out there at the moment about climate change and Greta Thunberg. So some very interesting stuff actually happening there. When we begin to look at a much bigger picture, there's a lot of eighth wave stuff influenced by the seventh wave and control that is going on with the whole climate debate. Everything is being relegated to human anthropomorphic cause, so that there is room for greater control and imposition of controls. Whereas when we open out our perspective and we begin to come into it from the perspective of the ninth wave, we actually see that there is a cosmic influence in respect of even the changing climate that is happening on our planet. And the truth is, in the same as, you know, like not living in a one season world, because the seasons always change, the climate always changes. And there is a strong correlation between changing climate, changing conditions on the surface of the planet and our nearby solar system, actions of the sun, our relationship with our cosmic environment, a direct correlation, as well as seeing a correlation between the action and the activities of our sun and these new waves that have been coming in. So I just want to highlight one or two of those for you. Solar cycles run on 11-year periods generally. This has been mapped since the 1750s. So they've monitored these 11-year solar cycles, and that 11-year cycle, during that cycle, you'll see on this little chart at the bottom here, you have a peak and you have a low. Okay, so you have a peak of the solar cycle where there's lots of solar activity, solar maximum, that's what that is. And you have during the solar maximum, you have a very, very active sun. You have a lot more solar flares. You have a lot more solar activity, therefore more radiation and CMEs. Oh, that's interesting. Sorry, I just wanted to say, Rachel's just said, listening to a wonderful talk about the cycles of the sun, where it is at the moment and the coming years. Ah, well, maybe it would be interesting, very interesting to post that, Rachel, because it's something else that we can perhaps monitor and be aware of because of the influences. So solar maximum, this is just the last few cycles since 1985. Solar maximum occurs when there's a lot of activity in the sun. Solar minimum is where there is a quiet sun, so the sun is very quiet. There's no coronal mass ejections, which means there is then less activity and less of an interference from the sun blocking Earth from cosmic rays. So there are two different effects that we experience as a consequence of what the sun is doing. When the sun is busy and when it's at its peak, we receive a lot of radiation coronal mass ejections from the sun. So we experience that very often as fluctuations in our mental state and our emotional state, our psychological well-being to a large extent, as well as geophysical events. When the sun is quiet, so when it's actually down here, there's nothing to stop all the gamma rays and the high frequency radiation from flooding the planet. And those high frequency rays are known as gamma rays. They affect DNA changes. They have DNA changing effects, which means mutations, changes to species. And that means ourselves as well as other species on the planet. It is not always perceived as favorable. However, it results in DNA mutations. Higher incidence of heart attacks, surprisingly enough, when cosmic rays are very high. What we have also is that the solar cycles affect climate and geophysical stability and earthquakes, etc. So what we see very, very often is when there are spikes. All of these spikes here represent solar flares and activity from the sun. So there's a very close relationship between the Earth and the sun. Is that when there are these solar flares, we often find corresponding earthquakes and geophysical activity on the Earth. We find ground currents impacting on our technologies, and we have a lot of effects taking place on the planet, on Earth. If you come down here on this chart, where's my cursor gone? On this chart down here, sort of 2010, we hit a solar minimum, which meant that the atmosphere and our Earth was wide open to cosmic radiation, which means lots of gamma rays, lots of increased charge in the atmosphere. It sort of electrifies the atmosphere, and the atmosphere has to find some way, or the planet has to find some way of discharging and distributing the buildup of charge. So you end up with a lot more lightning, and that lightning is what actually triggers the Schumann resonances. So I keep reading the wackiest stuff out there about the way that people are relating to the Schumann resonances. I really, I don't know, I can't say it anymore. There was one woman who'd posted just recently somebody had posted an article about a burst of light at the center of the galaxy. Now, we are so far away from the center of the galaxy, our little planet and our little consciousness, and the number of people who are actually actively working on raising consciousness is having a minimal effect on what's going on in the center of the galaxy. And, you know, if anything, we are subjected to the downloads of the cosmic information from cosmic universal mind, if you like. And the comment on this article that some woman had put was, oh, maybe this is happening at the center of our galaxy because of the Schumann waves and our meditations. And I just shook my head and I just thought, that's like real eighth wave fantasy thinking and total lack of critical thinking and understanding. But anyway, be that as it may. The solar cycles impact us hugely. Where we are at the moment, you'll look here at the dates. Here's 2020. We are going into 2020. Look at this. Solar maximum compared to the previous cycle was very quiet. So it means our planet Earth has been bombarded, so solar maximum being lower and quieter, not as much activity on the sun, fewer solar winds, lots more cosmic radiation bombarding the planet and actually being infused into our atmosphere. Lots of radiation, so there's lots of DNA changing that's actually taking place. And with gamma radiation, it's not just a higher incidence of heart attacks. We're talking about higher incidence of cancers, aberrant cell growth, all sorts of things like that as a consequence of that. So we just need to be aware. However, it does support the fueling of evolution. If we look at this, the cosmic rays, we said the pre-wave of the ninth wave actually happened in 2010. And the actual wave, ninth wave, became evident in 2011. So in 2011, we actually had lots of, we had some geophysical activity as a consequence of some little spikes on the sun. But here in 2010, when the pre-wave struck, we were just literally being bombarded with energies and radiation from a cosmic source. So it's kind of like the way was cleared for the holograms of the ninth wave to begin making their presence felt through reduction of the Earth's magnetic field, weakening of the Earth's magnetic field, and through the influx of radiation, which was adjusting our DNA, adjusting our physicality, which, while it has negative effects on those that are operating at a lower frequency, can have positive and beneficial effects, such as becoming an antenna for the incoming information. So there's a correlation between the way that the sun is behaving, the cosmic events that are actually unfolding, and the ninth wave and receiving updated information. Does that make sense, guys? It might sound a little bit convoluted, but it's one of the reasons why people are becoming more sensitive to solar events, but the way that they are actually interpreting these is from an eighth wave right brain perspective, and it doesn't take into account the whole picture. So I see there's no comments there in the chat room. I hope that actually does make a bit of sense. But the sun at the moment is actually very, very quiet. So most of the energy that is infusing the planet at the moment is cosmic. So, and we have seen that since 2014, there's been a steady increase in the measurements of gamma rays and X-rays in the upper stratosphere, in the atmosphere of the planet. So there has been an increase of DNA adjusting radiation and cosmic particles. Now, the sacred white animals, some of you have been through webinars and processes with me in the past where I've spoken about the sacred white animals. In fact, my attention was drawn to the sacred white animals, as I call them, probably around about 2013, 2014 was when they kind of started coming into focus and attention. And the understanding of their presence upon the planet really began to achieve a lot more clarity through the understanding of the ninth wave. But there is a direct link between the appearance of these animals, the ancient fifth wave prophecies and the influx of the ninth wave. In fact, these animals are indicative of the downloads of the ninth wave holograms. They are part and parcel of the manifestation of that embodiment as vehicles for diamond consciousness. They present themselves with total vulnerability, and it's the kind of vulnerability that we achieve us through surrendering to the process. They are the embodiment of that divine higher consciousness information, aka ninth wave information. So they serve as animal guardians, if you like, of the ninth wave, and their appearance on the planet started increasing in frequency and number across all of the different species from shortly before the appearance of the ninth wave. So they were heralds, if you like, of the ninth wave coming in, and they were foretold as part and parcel of all of the indigenous prophecies, and they are revered by all of the cultures in which they appear. The most well-known of the sacred white animals are the white buffalo and the legends of the white buffalo in America, the indigenous tribes, the white lions of Africa, and those are the two key ones. Oh, and the white stag, which is a European Celtic connection. So that's also European. In Asia, I think we had the white elephant, and it's really quite fascinating to see the connections that each and every one of those cultures had with these sacred white animals, and the honoring that they actually have for them. So here we see this is a white blackbird, this is a white whale, a little white otter, a white gorilla. And the key thing about these that is notable is that they have a different genetic makeup. They are not albinos, and that is key to understanding these animals. So this correlates with what I've just said about the cosmic rays and the changes in the DNA and mutations that actually take place as a consequence of the influx of cosmic rays. So they are not albinos. The one thing that distinguishes them, Rachel's just said beautiful, even just looking at them creates an internal reaction and activation. I find that too. To me, they actually are remarkable, and it would actually, for quite a while, I've wanted to do a program just working with the sacred white animals as a method of communication. So they've come in from time to time when it's actually been relevant. Just to give you some indication of the distinction, albinos lack all colored pigmentation. So they usually present with pink eyes, pink skin. So they don't have the color in the eyes either. So that's what is remarkable about the albinos. The sacred white animals still have distinctive coloring. So it's like the lions present with blue and green eyes, and there is no pinkness associated with their skin. Look at the otter, no pinkness. There is a pinkness here that you see underneath the skin of the gorilla, but there's no pink tinge in his eyes. And that's usually a marked presentation of albinos. So these white animals are leucistic, and it is a different genetic occurrence to the albinos. So there is a different gene, a different genetic presentation. It makes them almost sort of like a different species. And because of their coloring, it means that they don't blend in. They've got no camouflage. So depending on the environment that they're born into, if you get a white, this was the whole thing about the white lions, if they're born into the bush, they stick out like a sore thumb because they don't have that amber coloring, which allows them to be camouflaged in the bush. So they actually lack the camouflage that their traditional counterparts would actually have, which makes them extremely vulnerable to hunters, to other predators. So that is often perceived as a weakness. Certainly with the white lion as a key predator, it is perceived as a weakness. And yet the white lion can hunt equally, as well as survive equally, as well as, if you take the human intervention out of the way and the hunting aspect, they can survive equally as well as a traditional lion. And they tend to have larger, stronger bodies just as a whole. So that's just a little bit of insight into them, but they are key markers upon the planet. Their presentation, which is becoming more prevalent across species, is indicative of the ninth wave. So Michelle says, did Caucasians emerge at a similar point in evolution? And if so, could a new human subspecies emerge too? Well, this is the whole contention. I don't necessarily relate it to skin color with the human condition. So Caucasians actually did seem to emerge at a specific point in human history. And that would seem to go back, if my memory serves me correctly, I think it's about 11,000 years ago is when the Caucasians and the Caucasian racial, well, the Caucasian features actually first appeared. However, the presentation of the DNA is not marked as marked, if you like, as the presentation of the sacred white animals. A new human subspecies, it is said that there is a new human emerging, which is Homo luminous. And that would seem to fit in with the new kids and the different wiring that we're seeing with the 8th wave. The talk about new humans emerging and the prophecies that a new human being would actually emerge from this process. So there are shifts and changes taking place. However, it is a light that shines from within the human being. What these animals are doing is they are presenting as symbolic, a manifestation of symbolic transparency, which is where we are moving to in respect of the light that we emit from within us, irrespective of what our skin color is. Does that make sense? So the animals are, the white animals are an external manifestation of the internal light of higher consciousness that we are beginning to embody. They are our teachers. So that's why they actually appear differently. So just looking at this, the sacred white animals were actually prophesied by the 5th wave indigenous peoples. So yeah, again, we've got this connection between the 5th wave and the 9th wave. In 1994, the first white buffalo calf was born. It was the first white one that was seen since 1933. There've been I think there was one born in 1933, but I'll show you a bit about that prophecy in a moment. And in 1977, the first white lion was born in Timbavati. Apparently they had also, there are African prophecies that relate back to the legend of the white lions and how they had appeared some couple of hundred years ago and were then wiped out again. So 1977 was the first one that they'd seen for a couple of hundred years. That lion was hunted and it was believed they were completely extinct until they started observing births. And then there was a birth, Linda Tucker speaks about this in her book, a white lion born in captivity in 2000, and that was around the time that Linda Tucker went through massive transformation and her purpose was revealed as being the protector of the white lions as an apex predator. Really, really interesting stuff, but there's a massive mythology and legend that actually goes around these. So these animals are genetically different. They are leucistic and not albino. They are all connected with legends concerning the return of an age of harmony as well as a warning for humans to change and transform. So they present as a symbolic manifestation of the transparency that we can achieve through actually aligning with and switching on our own inner light. And they remind us of the harmony that can actually be gained externally when we do that. If we don't, they are serving as a warning of what will happen as a consequence, because these white animals will then ultimately begin to disappear, not just the white animals, but the others associated with the same species. And we see, you know, sort of a lot of species dying out as a consequence of human, what's the word, activity, of human activity. In history, when we look at the sacred white animals, they have always been revered as emblems of royalty. In the Asian cultures, you have the white peacock. They were always present in the royal court. The white elephant was revered as associated with royalty and sovereigns. They actually had them captive and worshipped them. In European history, as mentioned, you have the white stag, and there were certain hunting grounds that were held protected conservancies because of the white stag. The white lion is associated with African royalty. So there is this concept that they are associated with, and in the old way of understanding, it was externalized, an externalized connection to royalty. What they are presenting as now with their reappearance is a reminder of our own sovereignty, which is our own internal royalty. So here we come back to this reminder of the royalty that we connect with and become as a consequence of our alignment with the divine waves. It is a call for us to step out of servitude and into our own sovereignty. So it's a call to examine wherever we are in servitude to ego, to external authorities, to anything that is outside of us, and to recognize our own sovereignty and begin to act from that place. They are the embodiments of higher consciousness because they represent surrender and vulnerability and the courage that is accessed as a consequence of that. It takes, and you know, and there's that wonderful expression, it takes great courage to be vulnerable. Huge courage. Listen to Brené Brown. I think she's absolutely great. She talks a lot about vulnerability, and it's one of the most courageous things that we can do. They are diamond energy messengers. They are diamond consciousness, ninth wave energy messengers. So they are one of the ways in which we can connect with the holograms and the downloads of the ninth wave. So they're kind of like the early wave of embodying those holograms upon the planet so that we can begin to access. And that's where we start seeing this interspecies communication becoming stronger and stronger, if you like, across all species, more and more people becoming animal communicators, which is absolutely fabulous. The white animals take that interspecies animal communication to a whole new level. So do you see why, does that perhaps give you a lovely overview of why the sacred white animals are part and parcel of our alignment with the ninth wave concepts and understandings? They are the embodiments of higher consciousness. And this is really interesting because this was the a quote from Joseph Chasing Horse, Native American. I think it was the Lakota peoples. Because sacred white buffalo calf woman, as she was known, was the sacred pipe holder of the Lakota peoples, and this is where the legend came from. When white buffalo calf woman promised to return again, notice it's buffalo calf woman, so it's the feminine, and it's the return of the feminine. So symbolically, this is what she's representing. This was presented in a mythological experience by the Lakota peoples. She made some prophecies at that time. One of these prophecies was that the birth of a white buffalo calf would be a sign that it would be near the time when she would return again to purify the world. What she meant by that was that she would bring back harmony, ninth wave, and balance spiritually. No matter what happens, miracle was the name of a calf that was born, by the way. So that's what that means. No matter what happens to Miracle, the calf, in the coming months, Joseph Chasinghorse says that the birth is a sign from the Great Spirit, and the ensuing age of harmony and balance it represents cannot be revoked. And this is also, I think, important to bear in mind, because it's distinct wave language, in that the waves are all active. They cannot turn back, and they will not turn back. What we do with this now is up to us. That's where our choice point lies, is what we do with the waves. So cannot be revoked. Interesting that this is, as I said, it was a woman. So it's through the 8th and the 9th waves that the balance is actually restored to humanity when the light comes back on. The legends of the White Lion are in a very similar fashion. That the White Lion actually presented two. I think the original thing was there was a spaceship that came down, and one of the tribal leaders, who happened to be a matriarch and a woman, was actually drawn into the light of this circle, and there was a big flash, and she was impacted, and she became a famous seer, and all of the animals in that area actually changed and became white, and the one that was most prominent was actually the White Lion. So that took place in the Timbavati region, and that's really in a bit of a nutshell. But again, was a woman leader who was actually involved in the mythology and the legend and the prophecies of the White Lion. And also very, very interesting that it's a woman who has been chosen, Linda Tucker, to actually protect and carry forward the messages of the White Lion now, the ones that are now being born. So Rachel's just said 1933-96, I bought several porcelain animal figures. You could also buy them painted. And people used to say to me that the plain white ones were ugly. I couldn't imagine them colored. It felt important to have white animals. That's really, yeah, that's really interesting, because there was a symbolism there. And for me, it's just really interesting, especially with the whole White Lion thing, because of course that's where I have a huge connection, is because in 1977, I was at school, and I had a very aware biology teacher, and that was my first exposure to the white animals, was in 1977. But I only made the connection in the last 2 years. I only sort of realized it when the White Lion started communicating and started drawing me into that energy. This teacher, Shirley Meyer, was just absolutely wonderful. She was the reason why I went forward and actually studied biology. And went into the life sciences, because for her everything was fascinating. Whatever she taught us was just amazing. You know, the human being and life itself was just amazing. And she became aware that of the White Lion that had actually been born in Timbavati in 1977. And she opened up to take a group of our class to Timbavati to see if they could catch a sighting of the White Lion. So there was something that she had connected with. And I just remember so much being so disappointed, because at that time I badly wanted to go, and we had huge family issues, and we couldn't afford for me to go. And two of my friends went. They never saw the White Lion, but they went along on the trip and the outing. So I was just so disappointed. But that just stuck in my mind, was this was all about the White Lion in 1977 when I was at school. So sort of fast forward, 40 years. Oh my goodness. And here I am sort of visiting, and the white lions have actually been propagating and become so much more evident since 2000. So it's really since the 8th wave. So you see this association with the waves, the 8th wave and the 9th wave, with the feminine, and actually carrying through the higher consciousness. So another comment, I've also been more conscious recently of those who have paved the way for us. Absolutely. And in the same way, that is what we are doing. So we're not going to witness the changes on this planet in a blinding flash of light. We are paving the way we are the ancestors of the future. We are paving the way for those generations that are actually following. So what we do matters. What we do does matter. So this is something that I've just put in here because, and it came straight out of Carl Kalleman's book. When I actually saw this, I went, yes, this so resonates with me, because I've been trying to explain this in my way for quite a long time, is this whole concept of free will. Because what I've been saying is, you know, and everybody goes, this is the planet of free will, it's the planet of free will, and it's still very much eighth wave language. However, what Carl Kalleman says here, and I just really loved it, was at the ninth level, we can hardly talk about a free will. Because if the ego plays no separate role, we have integrated it, and your actions are determined in resonance with all that is, we can hardly talk about will as free. At this highest level, when we are fully in resonance with the ninth wave, our lives will not be about running separate individual agendas, but about fulfilling an aspect of the divine plan for humanity. So that is in service. There is no longer a separate ego that acts only on the individual's behalf, because that's where the ego acts. Instead, as we, in a unity state of consciousness, surrender to our higher selves, we act on behalf of the divine and its plan for humanity. This disappearance of the ego in the ninth wave may be appreciated by some, but not by others. But how could we possibly arrive at a golden age of peace unless we all surrender all agendas that are contrary to or not aligned with the divine plan? It is only if all of our actions are informed by contact with the divine, so that the largest possible view is taken into consideration, that all of our individual lives can ever be harmonized. Joy will never come from your agenda of being separate, but from the harmony that is created with all that is. So we almost surrender this concept of free will in favor for acting out and being a conduit for the divine will that operates through us. And in that moment, there is no free will choice. So again, this concept of free will, I like that Karen said, amen. In that moment, free will is actually not even a consideration. So free will is an ego separation-based concept that considers only the actions of the individual, if that makes sense. But when I saw this, I went, oh, somehow I'd missed that when I first read the book. And when I went through, as I was actually preparing for this, I went, oh, that has to go in. Okay, so Karen's put a little comment in there. Well, Karen, how do the rest of you resonate with that comment or that statement or that concept? And how many of you are prepared to surrender what you perceive as free will to the will of the divine? Because that's what I find. That is when I surrender my personal will to the divine will, that's when the miracles happen. That's when I let go and I go, all right, what is it that you want me to do? So it would be interesting. Anybody else got anything that they'd like to sort of put in there? It's like, yes, no, I'm thinking about it. Not sure about it at the moment. Bonnie says, this is the journey right now. Almeen has been saying that. Oh, wonderful. There we go. The process I'm doing now is all full of the surrender to divine will, not always easy. That's what I was saying earlier on with the ninth wave. We love this concept of harmony, but it is not an easy path to choose. It almost becomes, and this is what I've said before, it almost becomes a very narrow path that we choose the more we surrender to that divine will. Because it's like, well, there is only one choice that we can make given any situation. So Laurie says, my perception is that my free will allows me choice. And it is not to me about surrender. It is a choice to align with divine will. Okay, so your free will is a choice to align with divine will. That is, yeah, that is your personal choice. I absolutely get that, Laurie. Once we have made that alignment, the actions that take place as a consequence of that are not free will directed actions, they are divine will directed actions. So once we get to that point where we have made that choice, free will is no longer an option because divine will is the guiding force. So I'm going to leave that with you because surrender is an aspect of allowing and aligning with divine will in any moment. We can at any point choose not to do that. So I'm just going to do my thing at the moment. I'm just going to do X, Y, Z. But when we are operating in total alignment and flow, it's like there is no free will choice. So there's something to ponder and to contemplate, because that is also key to where we go and how this actually plays out, is in the contemplation of some of these concepts, because they're very internalized concepts. So Rachel says, I feel that's why I am happy to share freely. Good point. As well, yeah. So it's kind of, yeah, I'll let it go and put it out there. But it's really in what is it that divine will actually wants for us? What's for us to do to surrender to the divine? At the concept of surrender, I think is also important to understand, as mentioned earlier, because surrender is about letting down the barriers that are in the way of us aligning fully with divine will. So I think it's that understanding of surrender also becomes a bigger and greater concept the deeper we go with it. So that's what I'm going to say on that, but I wanted to throw that in because I felt that this was just really, really important. In respect of that. So what I have here is the keys. What I've summarized in my way to take forward are the keys to aligning with the ninth wave. And there's quite a few of them actually, as I realized when I was pulling them through. So recognize that this is a long-term adjustment process, therefore practice patience. There is no magic wand. And I've said this too sort of over the years, is that divine patience. I've learned that things are going to happen in perfect timing and in perfect divine flow. The more I'm aligned with that, and the more patience that I have about the appropriateness and the perfection of that, same way as it's the perfection of our entire love's journey, the more easily things actually do flow. And it doesn't always happen when we want it to. Let go of preconceived seventh or eighth wave ideals about purpose and mission, and allow yourself to be guided moment by moment by your connection to source. So we might have had ideas. I know I did at the beginning, 20 years ago. I had this grand ideal, of what and who I was going to be, and what and who I was born to bring to people in this life. That was different to any sense of mission I might have had when I was working in corporate, my life prior to that. So it's kind of our sense of direction and mission and purpose changes depending on our resonance and alignment with the different waves. So what we might have thought that mission was as part of the eighth wave is shifting as we move into the ninth wave and perhaps maturing. And as Rachel said earlier, our mission is to be who we are. So the more we actually come into wholeness, the more that actually translates into our actions in the outside world. Practice conscious connection to your own inner source of guidance. And that's often easier said than done, but it is an ongoing process. Rachel says, how many times have we had to let go of who we thought we were as we expanded into a greater aspect of our true self? Perfectly said, Rachel, because that is what this is all about. Excuse me with that, sort of moving the screen around. Dao Yi says, I've been practicing let go, surrender to divine will since the 90s, prepare myself for today. Absolutely, Dao Yi. And I think that really also demonstrates, is a wonderful demonstration of level of commitment, because there's so much that we are letting go of and so much that we are surrendering to as we do that. It's greater and greater understanding as with each and every let go process. In fact, this whole concept of letting go, what I thought might be really nice is I've got another teacher who is absolutely beautiful, who really embodies and works with this letting go concept. She's been through some incredibly challenging circumstances in her life. And I'd like to bring her in to have a chat about the letting go process with the next bonus session, the final bonus session, which will be probably at the end of October, early November, if you guys are happy with that. She's got some interesting things to say and to share in respect of letting go. Rachel says, I've used the phrase let go and let God so many times when I've had an intense challenge. Yes. And that's usually the time when we're forced into letting go. So we kind of move from that being forced, that's me, back against the wall, sort of wait until my back's against the wall before that happens. It's moving from that place of being forced to let go into a voluntary process that is conscious and aligned. So I hope that makes sense. Dao Yi says the commitment, that's the reason that I'm here. Absolutely. Yes, to continue surrendering. Anyway, okay, that's great. So also, keys to aligning with the ninth wave. Use whatever practices support you in balancing the left-right hemispheres of your brain to achieve greater clarity and awareness. I do have now, I've given you some of the brain balancing stuff. I can give you the brain balancing symbols again, those of you who might be interested in working with that. I also do have some HemiSync music, which uses sound to help to balance the hemispheres of the brain. So if any of you are interested in that, I will put that in as an attachment to on the download page once we've actually been through this. So it's kind of using whatever works. Elizabeth said, as all the things I thought I'd be fell by the wayside, I feel that I ultimately let go out of sheer confusion, yes, about what or where I should be. This is encouraging for me to see how I now slot right in. Oh, Elizabeth, that's beautiful, because there is that whole essence, that's that between confusion. What was it? Between confusion and anxiety, or whatever, is where the truth lies. And yes, so it is. It's in that point, in that confusion, that we completely let go. Okay, so I'll give you some HemiSync music that you can try. So it really is a case of finding what works for you in respect of balancing the left-right hemispheres. There are brain gym exercises you can use to help to balance the connection between the hemispheres. So you can do brain gym, HemiSync using sound. So brain gym uses physical movements, HemiSync uses sound. Excuse me, the brain balancing technique actually uses visual symbols as a focus tool. So it could be any one, or it could be a combination of all three that you find really works for you. It really is establishing what the right mode is that helps you to balance your brain and build the connections between the hemispheres. I know you did. Yeah, Bonnie, you were so disciplined. I love the brain balancing symbols. I do too. We did them for almost a year. Yeah, and it's something that you can keep up with. When the woman that I learned the brain balancing from has been doing the brain balancing symbols continuously for at least 12 years. So it's just a daily practice. So be aware of that, yeah. Practice awareness of the impact of respective waves with detachment. So you can start to see. That's nice. Dowie says I use sounds to help. Yeah, so Hemi Sync is just one way we can use chanting and toning, which actually also helps us to calm, balance the brain. Alternate nostril breathing has an impact on the brain in balancing the hemisphere. So there's a yogic breath technique. So there are many, many ways that you can work such that it suits you. Practicing awareness of the impact of respective waves is really being observant. You guys have been saying this all along as you've learned about the various waves, that you can see how they are acting out in the environment. And it's easier to do that with detachment when we have the understanding about where it's coming from. So that's an additional practice. When we can do that, we remove the emotionality from it. When we remove the emotionality, we give ourselves greater access to our center of calm within. Decide what you are committed to, then set and hold your long-term vision for unity based on the potentialities of the ninth wave, because that's what they are at the moment. Your vision and long-term vision for a future that embodies unity and unification and harmony might be very different to mine. So it could be that your vision for a unified future focuses on your community, and or focuses on agriculture, or focuses on the ecosystem, or whatever it might be. There might be a focus. So it's like set a focus and a commitment to your vision, your own personal long-term vision for unity. Spend some time every day contemplating and connecting with this vision. You can create a creative vision board for that. And that's not a vision board, you know, sort of for the manifestation a la The Secret. It is really about supporting your ability to focus your vision, because that helps you to gain access to the potentials and to what you, the part that you are designed to fulfill in the bigger picture. So spend time every day contemplating this particular vision. So again, you know, get specific, get as specific as possible when you do that. You know, how would it look? How would it feel? How would it smell? There are little projects taking place out there all the time at the moment. You know, do you want to lump those all together and create something really big, and maybe start off with a small vision that includes unity and harmony for your family unit, or for your greater family unit, or for your small community, whatever works for you, but begin cementing it so that it is a construct that can begin to take shape in your mind. And unity and harmony for yourself. What would that look like? How would that look like for you? You know, and create a vision board around that. So we can explore the experiential aspects of these ideas, I think, in the next program, which is what we actually discussed earlier. But in the meantime, this gives you something to start with. Find your point of calm within the external chaos, which is likely to continue, because the interference patterns of the waves are creating the chaos out of which the creativity actually begins to emerge, the solutions begin to emerge. So it's really, really important for us to be the calm in the center of the storm and to find that central point within. The sixth wave is in a night, which means it is breaking down until 2406. So that's a very interesting reference point to hold. It's quite a long cycle. Make time to do what makes your heart sing. Most people know that. Very important and very relevant, because anything that you do that generates that heartfelt feeling actually expands the heart and helps to take you into the zone. So that's a pretty generalized key anyway, that is relevant for us for opening the heart. Recognize the divinely guided anarchy. And this is an interesting one, because some people will balk at this. Disorder, dissidence, and confusion as the result of wave interference patterns. So the anarchy that's taking place, we may also be, if it is in alignment with us, drawn to taking part in or stirring up, challenging. What anarchy does is it challenges the status quo. And the status quo that we are living in is based on the 6th and the 7th waves, largely. And the status quo with the 8th wave is being challenged at the moment. Divinely guided anarchy is divinely guided or inspired action, which creates disorder or dissidence by challenging the status quo. And it is part and parcel of the interference patterns. So do not be afraid if that is your guidance to take action in that direction, because that is what is ultimately going to stir things up so that the resulting structures put in place can reestablish the harmony. That's interesting, Rachel. That's one way of doing it. It's putting the head above the parapet, because someone's going to shoot you down. I've been feeling quite powerful internally to share information that many won't want to look at. Yes, absolutely. And I think that is really important. But it's to do it from the heart. It's doing it for the right reasons. And I've been accused previously of putting out things and focusing on being negative when we should just be focusing on being positive. And there's a very big difference between an awareness of what is not right and placing our focus and attention on what is not right. We are not fueling it by being aware of it. We can still focus on our vision for what it is that we want while being aware of everything that is actually adverse to that, so that we help to generate awareness in the big picture for others that have not seen it yet. Become comfortable with not knowing. That's the confusion. Become comfortable with not knowing the answers and release attachment to outcomes. And by releasing attachment to outcomes is also when we release, to a large extent, our free will imposition on what we want the outcome to be. So it's like, whatever the outcome is actually meant to be, then I'm happy with that. So, and become comfortable with that instability of not knowing. Hurdles will exist, and it's important that we recognize this. However, the way forward is no longer blocked. So we are not blocked from receiving the information or support that we require in order to begin bringing about those holograms as reality. We will, however, have to overcome challenges and hurdles along the way. So it's important to recognize that. So it's not plain sailing. It's not just the easy way. It can be graceful. It can be as graceful as we actually allow it to be. It could be challenging until 2031 for the next decade. And very, very interestingly, I picked up astrological reports this week that were talking about exactly the same thing, without knowing anything about the 9 waves and the timing, is that the next decade could actually be a very challenging decade, but it also holds a huge amount of potential. So the next decade takes us up to sort of 2030 and 2031, when waves 7, 8, and 9 all converge into day mode. They all move into the day, into the light. Stabilization will only likely then occur in the decade that follows. However, there is a great deal of potential still because of the number of days of the 8th and the 9th waves during the next decade. So we will have to overcome the hurdles as a consequence of the interference patterns. Just be aware of that, because it's a case of like not giving up at the first sign of a challenge. We've somehow been conditioned to believe through the 8th wave that everything is just easy. So if it's not, I'll give up. And I've been there quite a few times, and I'm still here. Seek to share the understanding of 9th wave principles. Rachel's just said here, there are a lot of people referencing 2030 and 31 now in many different types of information. Yes, it seems to be a target date that has become relevant for many different reasons. And it is coming through in many different ways. There's the UN Agenda 31, which has replaced UN Agenda 21, which is an agenda to microchip people, which is one of the agendas that's rolling out. What we do between now and then will actually impact with AI. So what we do and what we choose and how we choose to respond to all of this will determine how that technology actually rolls out. That's very definitely a seventh wave and a sixth wave control element in the UN Agenda 31. So yeah, we want to align ourselves with the higher potentials and bringing those into being. So, in seeking to share the understanding of ninth wave principles with individuals born into the eighth and the ninth waves. So, somebody can be born into the eighth wave or the ninth wave and yet not be aware of the principles. However, the ability that they have to align with it is going to be much easier generally than those of us who were born before that. It's so important that we support each other in standing strong and balanced within the external chaos. I actually agree with you. Absolutely. Thank you. So, eighth and ninth wave, these are the people who will ultimately shape world events. They are our children and our grandchildren for the most part. So we have, as we educate others, we generate a stronger alignment and understanding and internal understanding of the ninth wave within ourselves through the sharing of those principles, through the education and through the actions that we take. We strengthen that alignment with the ninth wave and hence the realization of the positive, powerful potentials that it actually brings into being. So yes, through our children, through our grandchildren, through people that we know, if we can bring it into the business environment. Already there are businesses that are bringing spiritual principles. They're starting to bring eighth wave principles into the business environment. So some of them are beginning to understand and are being opened to these concepts, and more will through the actions of individuals taking things into businesses. So the more we can share without being evangelical about it, the greater will become the influence in the collective and the reach of the ninth wave. So I hope that makes sense. Bonnie says, yes, Rachel, connecting with soul family to support, be able to do what we came here to do. Absolutely. Be prepared to take political action where necessary. Thoughts alone do not change the world or ourselves. We know that what we think does have an influence and ripple in the quantum realm, but the thought itself is not what brings about the change. It is the action that brings about the change. You know, and there's a wonderful example of this with like Russian athletes who actually use visualization in order to enhance their performance. And what they have found, it's not the visualization just in and of itself. It is the visualization combined with the physical practice and commitment which generates the greatest results. So it's actually, yeah, those were great studies. Absolutely fantastic studies. So we have to bear that in mind. Yes, what we think and what we believe matters. How we act as a consequence of shifting thoughts and beliefs has even more influence on matter and on the physical world. So that's really important. And political action in order to change the environment is also important. So all of the protesters that are out there, I think, you know, sort of those that are brave enough to stand up, like the students and the people in Hong Kong are doing, I think that is just absolutely fantastic, is standing up to a patriarchal governance and socialist, self-serving society. And that's almost at odds. The terms socialist and self-serving don't usually go together, but that's in essence exactly what they are. Socialism is just capitalism under a different guise. Political, when one feels called and is in the divine unfolding, it's not for all of us. Yes, absolutely. Where necessary, where we are called. So that's part of the surrendering to divine will and allowing that to guide everything that we do. And this is something that I thought would be particularly useful to help to focus your your mind, is identify a project that is unique to your own talents, that expresses the attributes and qualities of the ninth wave. Actions that are expressions of service to all, of unification, of harmonization, etc. And then take action, get involved in making that project practical, or if it's an external project, get involved in it, support it, initiate it, start something new, but get involved with it. So that involves taking stock of your personal gifts and talents that you are aware of in this moment. So it's not what you thought you would be doing, what you are aware of in this moment, that expresses the attributes and qualities of the ninth wave. So go back and have a look at what the ninth wave actually brings. And then have a look at the projects that are out there that are expressions of that, and get involved in some way, shape or form. Whatever we do and take action on really has a positive and powerful impact. Sorry, I'm just looking at the time here. So Rachel says, as is becoming aware of the false narrative that attempts to increase fear, like global warming. Absolutely. Absolutely. The climate has always changed. And it has cycled through, and it actually goes through cycles in accordance with the cycles of the sun and everything else that is actually going on cosmically. It has always changed. This anthropomorphic global warming story is tiresome. You start reading articles, and I say to people, start reading articles about carbon dioxide. Agricultural growers, if I can just add to this on the global warming thing, agricultural breeders, processors, greenhouse growers know that when they increase CO2 levels in a greenhouse to, I think it's around 12 to 1400 ppm, that the growth of the plants is phenomenal. It grows, the plants grow incredibly. Our atmospheric CO2 is at 400 ppm. And there are reports based on satellite observations that our planet is actually greening as a consequence of the increases in CO2 that are not anthropomorphically generated. There is a very, very small influence by the burning of fossil fuels. And if one had to look at a greater plan, how fantastic would it be that we were provided with fossil fuels that we could burn to create warmth, to generate carbon dioxide, which would help to green the planet and bring the carbon back, sequester the carbon back through the plants, giving us oxygen to continue breathing, until we actually found and became aware of some of the potential hazards of digging up coal and raping the planet and fracking and destroying the Earth's crust to generate new energy resources. But the entire divine plan has just been absolutely amazing. So it's mind-blowing to contemplate the actual size of this planet. It's not as small as we're led to believe. She knows what she is doing. Yes, absolutely. So it's always, sort of take your vision out, expand that perspective as far as possible by doing your own research, doing your own reading, and not accepting everything that's given. That's why the left brain has been opened, so that we can begin to understand and see things in a different way. Everything's about balance. Everything is about balance. Yes, even the whole carbon dioxide story. It's really quite fascinating. So that's what I would suggest. Keys to Aligning is identify a project that is unique to your own talents, that expresses the attributes, and get involved. But that project could just be something as small as a relationship, applying the ninth wave principles to a relationship, envisioning, and then stripping away and surrendering to divine will, and then seeing what the consequences are within that dynamic and within that relationship when you abide by those principles. So it's a very, very simple concept, not easy to do, but a simple concept. And then some of the things that I would suggest as a consequence of this, until we do the next bonus session, is I would say, really take your journal out and take a really deep look and an honest look at what are you willing to let go of in order to shift your alignment to the ninth wave. And that is beliefs, ideals, behaviors, thoughts, emotions, communities, relationships. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to have more of yourself, of your true self and true guidance? And that takes some really deep examining and observing on a day-to-day basis where your attachments are. Okay. And I noticed that it's like, oh, you know, and I've got one or two friends who are really good at pointing that out for me. You know, this, you're doing this or you're attached to that. My friend Yaz was actually very good at that. There's a belief around that somewhere that you might want to re-examine. Not that you have to let go of. That's a choice. Let go of, but if you want to actually align with divine will, then that is the only choice. So have a look at and examine those. What risks are you prepared to take in order to allow the ninth wave frequencies and the divine plan to unfold through you? Deeply examine the fears that exist in the I can't because and the yes buts. So have a look at things that you would do if nothing was in the way, and then where you're languaging around that. So you would look at that and go, but I can't do that because. I can't because. Or, yeah, that's a good idea, but. So you might want to list all of those things and have a look at all of the yes buts that you put in place. And what are the risks that would be needed for you to take if that was truly in alignment with your divine unfolding? And then you ask and connect with the guidance. Because if your guidance says, do it this way, it's like, for me, you know, I mean, the guidance for me has been extreme, and it's not always that way for other people. But in order for me to integrate the lessons, it's almost had to be extreme. It's like an all or nothing. The only way that I could learn it was if I was, you know, put into an extreme situation where the totality of that surrender then opened up the doorway. It's like technically becoming homeless. That was a biggie. And it's been absolutely amazing the way that it's worked out. So Dao Yi says, following the divine will, everything would fall into what and where it should be. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have a look at all of those yes buts, and then we align with the divine will that wants to move us in a certain direction. Yeah, so have a look at where your heart has perhaps told you a few times you've been needing to go, where your heart has wanted to take you, but you have stopped it from doing so because it would involve too much of a perceived risk to a relationship, to a financial situation, to a whatever it might be. Have a look at where your heart wants to take you and then the risks that would be needed for you to follow where that wants to take you. So Rachel says, I think the more we integrate the frequencies of the ninth wave, the more we are naturally seeing people and things easily falling away. Absolutely. Absolutely. Utilize the ninth wave calendar to adjust your energies and cycles to the ninth wave. I think I've given you guys the link to the ninth wave calendar before. And if not, I will put it again under this video so that you can begin to track it. So today is day 1 of an 18-day cycle of light, which is a cycle of creativity, opportunity, and moving things forward. And it's perfectly aligned with the Saturn having gone stationary, so it's not dragging things back anymore, with various astrological configurations. So it's a beautiful alignment at the moment. That's why it feels so much easier right now. But then you follow it through. When you align your frequencies and your patterns to that wave, you naturally come into greater synchronization with it. Continue. So if you wanted to initiate a project, you also want to initiate something or move it forward during that 18-day upward cycle. Continue to identify and heal all areas where there is an apparent separation from source as a consequence of beliefs, ideas. So that's really something most of you will have done a lot of your own work around this. So it's using whatever tools you have at your disposal at the moment in order to continue doing that. What I'm going to suggest, so this is public as we spoke at the beginning of this session, is to initiate a Masters of Destiny second level, if you like, that is going to be experiential, where we will look at specific tools and processes to assist us in harmonizing with the ninth wave and releasing and letting go of all of the patterning that keeps us bound in some way, shape, or form with beliefs of the previous waves. So what I would suggest you do is, in between now and launching, use the tools that you have at your disposal and follow these guidelines and ideas, and just see how the synchronization becomes more evident in your life as you follow the ninth wave path. So that's just a couple of ideas. You have now all of the information and the background that you can begin to integrate. I just wanted to show you this because I thought this is such a beautiful image that consolidates the understanding ultimately of the ninth wave as finding the pearl within. And the pearl within is only created as a consequence of the irritation of the lining within the oyster shell. So the symbolic connection with that is that the irritation of the lining comes as a consequence of the interference patterns of the seventh and the eighth waves. But as that is happening, what we are doing is creating the pearl within. And many of the ancient cultures, especially the Asian cultures, I think, actually talk about the pearl, the inner pearl, and releasing that pearl of wisdom. And it's, think about pearls, they are translucent, they are iridescent, they are just absolutely sort of beautiful, fragile objects, and yet things of incredible beauty. So we create our internal beauty, our internal pearl, as a consequence of all of the irritations and the perfection of our entire life and our entire life's journey. Every single one of those hurdles has served as a learning experience. So I just like the symbolic emblem of the pearl in the oyster as a way to conclude our 6th masterclass. So I'd like to just, sort of open it up to you guys for any comments, questions, carrying it forward from here. Karen says, thank you. Rachel said she's posted the 9th wave calendar link. Thank you, Rachel, in the Diamond Community Facebook page. That's fabulous. Yeah, thank you. I will also post it on the link with the video. Does this and has this given you the knowledge base and the understanding to contextualize how we see things changing, how things have happened, and how we see things playing out and beginning to change into the future in our world, and how we might begin to even bring about, through that understanding, the changes, and how it's a more realistic, for want of a better word, aligned approach. So Rachel says, I think what you've presented gives us a greater understanding of what we are naturally unfolding from within our own self. That is the ultimate objective, because that's what it is. And it's a recognition and an acknowledgement through that of what other individuals are unfolding for themselves, and where they are aligned with very specific systems that are connected into the frequencies of other waves. So where we can actually support by helping to elevate that. Bonnie says, thank you so much. This is rich and will take us to the next steps in each of our own evolution. I do like the idea of the next step. The knowledge has been very, very helpful. It makes sense in a somewhat chaotic world that makes my sensitive soul want to seek shelter. Yeah, but with understanding the importance of each of us and our diamond lighting gifts. Wonderful, Bonnie. Thank you so much. Katie says, yes, please. Is that yes, please to the continuation? I hope this has been of value for you all. I mean, that is my deepest desire, is to ensure that what you have has value, that you take away something that adds to your life. You know, that is my objective and intention with everything that I do. Thank you, Bunny. Great, great value. And hopefully we can expand on this. Geraldine says, thank you so much. This has been so illuminating and expansive. I loved learning from you and from all of the experience shared within the group. Love that you're going to offer a level 2 experiential program. I think you got a typo error there, Geraldine. I think, count me in. Yep. Thank you. It is, Bunny says, it's the richness of the group. Katie says, I love the idea of moving forward with even more understanding, exceptional value. Thank you. Thank you, Katie, and bless you. Rachel says, it certainly makes me feel more self-empowered to continue to become a greater aspect of my true self and to be my own unique expression of creation to then share with everyone. That's absolutely wonderful. Oh, Karen, that's wonderful. I have tears of gratitude. An absolute, what an absolute blessing and honor, and I thank you for that. All of you, for your sharing, for your vulnerability, your willingness to share, and your contributions too. Bunny says, Rachel, I was just thinking that and seeing where I've grown and where I am now. That's beautiful. Just never stop seeing the perfection in everything. Rachel says, I see each and every one of you. Dayi says, thank you. I have lots of doubt about myself, spending too much time in working myself. Now I realize I've been doing just right. Dao Yi, absolutely. And you're here, you know, you have a home within the community that makes sense. You found your way here. Yes, isn't that the truth? Yes. And that is what's so important, you know, because so often we feel that's that whole idea, Rachel, that you brought up earlier, is that we have this idea that we are wrong, that we are broken, that we need to be fixed. So in understanding the perfection in that, and that's what you ladies, what you guys are saying, is that you can see the rightness in everything and understand and connect with the rightness in yourself as a consequence of the total journey. And appreciating the perfection in all of that. And that will become more prominent as we go into the experiential layers now that that understanding is there. So thank you. Elizabeth said, thank you. The layers of knowledge and understanding that this program has provided are continuing to build and will continue for a long time to come. And thank you, Elizabeth. That's exactly it, because we are unfolding. We're creating that pearl. And as we create the pearl, we strip away another layer of the oyster shell to wrap it around the pearl. So we transform that material into, you know, sort of its nacreous luster. So yes, symbolically, that's beautiful. Thank you all for your fabulous contributions. Love to you all. I love you all. And I want to thank you all for your contributions too. It seems like what we've been searching for was already there. Yes, it has always been there, and isn't that the truth? And now we found it and we're unfolding it. It's our true self. Love to you all. Thank you. I will let you know about the final bonus session as soon as I've confirmed a date with you all, so I know we will have an opportunity to gather again with this wonderful, loving community. And until then, with gratitude, and I wish for you more gracious and beautiful unfolding of ahas and realizations and the truth of you, and greater and deeper alignment with your divine self within. So until then, I just want to say, love you all, and thank you so much for your time, for bringing your wonderful energies into this space for this loving community. It has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you for trusting me to share this material as well. I'm going to, if I can. Stop the recording. There we go.